G'day guys, have you ever wanted to take a pure Khorne Demons army to a tournament, lots of Bloodthirsters, lots of big monsters, and just destroy your opponents on the tabletop? Well, I've just come back from the Geelong Heresy where I did just that, and I want to share with you guys how you could potentially achieve similar results yourself. So the Geelong Heresy was a little bit of an unorthodox event, so we'll go through that in some detail, we'll go through my list in some detail, and we'll go through the games because I was able to win first place Best General at this event with an army where every single model was a Khorne Demon. So I want to share that with you guys. Let's get straight into the video.
Look for the Blood God.
G'day guys, so I've just got back from Geelong Heresy and I thought I'd take an opportunity to talk about the games, talk about the results, whilst having a slideshow of some of the beautiful armies that were in attendance playing up on the screen so that you guys can have a bit of a look at some of the quality that was achieved by the players at this Geelong Heresy event. So I'll get the boring stuff out of the way first, which is the event format, etc. So it's a little bit of a different event, this one. It's not ITC ranked, and it's a 3,000 point event. So it's using the Onslaught mission rules, so the step up from Strike Force. And basically, yeah, you can bring 3,000 points worth of models, and they've replaced the rule of 3 with a rule of 4 instead. So you can, take the same data sheet 4 times, which was really interesting. And then as for the event format, it was 4 games instead of 5, 2 on each day. And the rounds were a bit longer than standard because obviously when you're trying to move around, 3,000 points worth of models per player, it's going to take a little bit more time. There's a lot more dice to be rolled, etc. So yeah, there were longer rounds, 2 rounds per day, 3,000 points. And for the missions, they basically just took the standard Nephilim missions, but they replaced the sub-primary, so the mission-specific primary. They replaced that with a themed one around the general theme of the event. And the theme of the Geelong Heresy event is obviously, bigger games, bigger models, but it was also around having a big night out. So there's, it's a heavy drinking sort of environment. And people get on the drinks. We go out for dinner after the event as one big tournament. We all go out and it's a great place to meet friends and, make friends and all those sorts of things. So that's sort of part of the theme of the event as well. So basically in the missions, each one of those sub-primaries is based around sort of telling the story of a character that's on a night out and he's getting drunk and he's, getting in all kinds of mischief. So there was really interesting missions there, but they didn't have that big of an impact on the game because it was only the sub-primary that was changed out. So all your traditional secondaries are available to you, and the missions themselves are pretty standard, standard deployments, standard, standard primaries like take and hold and that sort of thing. So all in all, it was a relatively standard event with those few seemingly subtle but actually somewhat significant changes, mainly the 3,000 points and the rule of 4. So what I decided to do for this event was think outside the box a little bit. I've been playing CSM pretty religiously since the book came out, and part of my tournament experience has been making sure that I take a different legion to every event so that I can get a really, really robust and well filled out sort of understanding of that Chaos Space Marines book. But for this event, given that it wasn't ITC ranked, given that it was 3,000 points, given that you could take 4 of the same unit, I didn't want to write some kind of janky Chaos Space Marines list and sort of, dilute my understanding of the Codex based on, your standard mission format. I didn't want to run a list that was going to do really, really well and then think that that legion is really, really good, when in reality it was only good because of the fact that this mission was following a non-traditional format. So I thought to myself, okay, well, what other armies have I got that are fun and thematic and cool? And basically I looked at my old Chaos Demons army, and I was like, I have a shit ton of Bloodthirsters, and given that this is a rule of 4, I was like, this is a perfect opportunity to run a full Bloodthirster army. So what I actually did is I repainted my army, which I'll chuck a display up of that as well in this video. I did a video showcasing it recently too, so if you want to go back and check that out, that's up on the channel. But basically what I did is I ran 4 Bloodthirsters. I ran Skarbrand as well, because he's a different data sheet, so you can run him. I ran BELAKOR as well. And then I ran 3 Soul Grinders and 3 units of Bloodletters. So it was pretty much 9 big monsters was my list. And then there was a little bit of troops just to fill out the detachments. And it was based around 3 patrol detachments. So each patrol had 2 big monsters and a Soul Grinder and a unit of Bloodletters. So that's how I filled out the detachments. And then the idea was this is a bit of a silly event. It's, the main focus of the event is on drinking and having fun and, letting your hair down, so to speak. So I thought this would be a fun army that's really easy to pilot. I can just run it at people, move and advance everything turn 1, and then turn 2, just make maximum charges on everything. So that was sort of the idea. And the list actually performed exceptionally well, to the point where I actually won Best General, first place. So of all the people in attendance, I got the highest battle score. Now, it is worth noting at this point that battle score, they used a slightly non-traditional format there as well, and that's because of the only 4 rounds and the size of the event. Like, I think there was 35 to 40 players in attendance. I'm not 100% sure on that number. But because of that, they knew that there was a high likelihood that the event would end with multiple undefeated players, and they didn't want that. So what they did is they did 2 things. One of them was that they made it so that in order to get a win, you had to beat your opponent's score by at least 10 victory points. So if you finished the game with an 85 and your opponent finished with an 82, even though you technically won, that would be put through as a draw because you were within 10 victory points of your opponent. And the idea here was to basically make it so that it's harder to actually secure a win, and make it so that, in order to get those wins, you actually have to really pump your opponent, which I thought was quite smart given the context. Normally, I'm not a huge fan of those sorts of things where they're basically manipulating the definition of a win. But given the situation where they had only 4 rounds to try to crown an overall winner, they sort of needed to do that. So that's fine. And the other thing that they did that was quite interesting is, your standard ITC format is you have win, loss, draw. And a win might be worth 0 plus your victory points. A draw is worth 500 plus your victory points. And then a win is worth 1,000 plus your victory points. Whereas what they did for Geelong Heresy was they had a crushing loss, a minor loss, a draw, a minor win, and then a crushing win, with the 5 different types of scores that you could achieve. And I'm not 100% sure off the top of my head, but it was something like a crushing win was worth 25 points, a win was worth 20 points, a draw was worth 15 points, a loss was worth 10 points, and then a crushing loss was worth 5 points. And basically then, that would be all added together to determine who wins. And the idea here was to make it so that even if there are multiple undefeated players, the players who get the bigger wins, the biggest wins, end up winning the event, as opposed to, just an aggregate of scores. So it was a way of sort of trying to reward players for really, really crushing their opponent. And the way they determined whether or not you got a crushing win or a regular win, or a crushing loss or a regular loss, was if you doubled your opponent's victory points, it was a crushing win. Or if you tabled your opponent, it was a crushing win. And anything other than that was considered, a standard win. And the same on the inverse for losses, right? So if your opponent doubled your score, you got a crushing loss. Or if they tabled you, you got a crushing loss. So that was sort of how they worked out the scores. And then basically my results overall was 3 crushing wins and a draw. And as a result, that put me in the highest place. There was actually one undefeated player who managed to go every game without losing. However, his wins were quite small. He only just won most of those games. So as a result, he got 3 regular wins and a single crushing win, which was not worth as many points as my, for like 3 crushing wins and a draw, which there's a little bit of controversy around that. And to be honest, I'm not 100% sure if I like that system. I think that, you know, the traditional idea of the undefeated player wins is probably superior. But that is the, you know, the format that this event ran with, and they wanted to reward people for, you know, playing hard 40k was the idea. Like, go in for the table, try and table your opponent, ignore the missions, try to table them. And just have big bloody fights in the middle with big models and big armies and just absolute chaos was the idea. So I sort of embraced that attitude and decided to run just all these Bloodthirsters and just run at people and just smash them and either get tabled or table them in the process. That was the idea. But yeah, so as a result, I won the event. Well, I didn't win the overall for the event because they had a painting element as well. So this is another thing that the event did that was slightly unorthodox, where they had they basically had 3 different scores that you could generate. So one of them was based on the presentation quality of your army. So the better you paint it, the higher your score, which is pretty cool. Then the second one was off your battle score, which is based off your, you know, your crushing loss, draw, win, crushing win, you know, scores. That was your generalship or your battle score. And then they had your sportsmanship score, which was basically based around whether or not you had any infringements or accusations laid against you at the tournament. And if you didn't, you'd get full points. And then on top of that, each player got to vote for their favorite opponent. And every vote that you received was worth a certain number of points as well. So the idea was that, you know, they're trying to reward people for being a good sport, reward people for participating in the, you know, the spirit of the event, because it's a non-traditional event, and they really wanted to reward people who were thinking outside the box and having fun and having drinks with their opponent and, you know, being social and all that sort of stuff. So they introduced a sportsmanship score towards that. And then basically there was 2 sets of podiums. There was the presentation podium, which was the best presented, second best, and third best. Then there was the tournament podium, which was, you know, best general, second best general, and third best general. And that's the podium that I won. That's the award that I received. And then on top of that, they had an overall winner, which went to the person who had a combination of presentation, battle score, and sports score. And for that, I came second. The bloke who beat me, he only beat me by 5 points. So he actually, you know, if I got one more sports vote, I would have taken the win, or if he got one less. So it was very, very close, you know, run for that top spot as well, which was slightly disappointing to me because I've won the Geelong Heresy overall the last 2 years in a row. So I was really going for that three-peat. I was really hoping to win it a third time. But I'm more than happy with, you know, the best general award because, you know, that's something that I pride myself on is being a quality, you know, a strong player. So, whereas I know I'm not the best painter in the world, so I knew that when it comes to best overall, I was going to struggle to sort of take home the gold there. But yeah, so that's a bit of an understanding of the event. Now I'm just going to give you a real quick brief rundown of, you know, my opponents and how that each game sort of resolved. So the first game I was up against an absolutely stunning Night Lords painted Chaos Knight army. Absolutely beautiful fucking army. And that game was over pretty much by turn 2. Basically what happened is I went first and I just moved everything up into the center of the table. I had BELAKOR hiding behind a line of sight blocking Ruin, and I had 2 Bloodthirsters in Deep Strike reserves. And now this is a really, really neat trick that you can do, and it actually still works in 2,000 point games. I still think this is a really powerful combo, where basically what you do is you start with BELAKOR on the table, you start with 1 or 2 Bloodthirsters in Deep Strike, and then in your turn 2, you can spend 2 command points to teleport BELAKOR to anywhere on the table, and then you can drop your 2 Bloodthirsters in that reinforcement step, and they can use his Warp Locus to get 6-inch charges on your opponent, which is really, really strong on a Bloodthirster from Deep Strike. So against this Knight player, basically I went first, and I moved up into the center of the table with everything, kept BELAKOR hidden, and then he had 1 turn of shooting where he killed, I think he killed 2 Bloodthirsters and bracketed a couple of the Soul Grinders, so a pretty strong turn of shooting from him. But then in my turn 2, I spent the 2 command points, teleported BELAKOR behind his Bloodthirsters, behind his knights, and then basically dropped 2 Bloodthirsters behind him, and he still had a Bloodthirster and some Soul Grinders in front of him. And then I basically sandwiched him. And in that turn 2, I pretty much killed all of his, like, everything. He had a few armages left. And at that point, we more or less called the game. Like, I just tabled him. So that was my first crushing win. The next game I played was against Alex Franz, and he was running a highly tuned Chaos Space Marines list, which was really, really interesting. And this is the round that I got a draw on. And basically, Alex's list was red Corsairs, but it had the the standard unkillable Terminator brick, which you see in most events, in most lists. It had Master of Possessions, Dark Apostle for Illusory Supplication. It had Abaddon the Despoiler. It had, a bunch of Raptors and stuff like that for objectives. And then it had a few interesting things. So then it had a detachment of Flamers, Tzeentch Flamers, so Chaos Demons detachment. And this is another thing that you see in a lot of like really highly tuned Chaos Space Marine lists these days for tournaments, is they're basically taking those Flamers to shore up some of the weaknesses of the Chaos Space Marine book, namely that we don't have much shooting. So yeah, he brought that, which was really, really powerful. And then the other detachment that he brought was actually 3 Warglaves, or no, not Warglaves, fucking War Dogs. So 3 of those in a Dreadblade detachment, so they got Agents of Chaos as well. And he took one of the traits on them that gives them +1 to hit against monsters and vehicles. So this army was so well tuned for killing my army. He was getting +1 to hit on his guys with all their melter guns and stuff. He was getting... The Flamers are really good for killing demons because they don't care about your demon save. They're just like, here's 1 billion wounds, like, you're going to fail saves. And then on top of that, he had Abaddon, and my whole army only does damage in 1 phase, which is the combat phase. So Abaddon was an absolute pain in my ass in that game. But I still managed to bring it into a draw, which was, a relief, because I thought I was completely fucked when I looked at his list. I was like, I can't beat that. How the fuck am I supposed to beat that? Abaddon alone just rolls up my whole army because he just eats Bloodthirsters like it's nobody's business. And I actually think I could have turned it into a win. I made some pretty big critical mistakes during that game, which was disappointing. Like, when I look back at it myself, I was quite disappointed. He took Long War, and for example, I kept feeding him Long War points that I didn't need to, by putting units on an objective when I knew that he had something within range that could very easily kill them. So in reality, I was never going to be on that objective in the following command phase, so there was no reason to be on it in that turn. I should have just left those objectives alone and known that by doing so, I'm not getting any points, but neither is he. Whereas instead, I was just like in autopilot, and just jumping on objectives, and I played that quite poorly, which is why we got that draw. But yeah, it was a sick game. Alex is a sick bloke. I love him to death. So got all the time in the world for him. And yeah, that was a lot of fun. Then we went into day 2. My first opponent of day 2 was another knight army. So I was like, oh, yep, cool. Given that my first round I tabled knights by turn 2, I'm not particularly worried. And that game more or less followed the exact same format. I went first, moved up into the center of the table. He shot and killed... He actually killed nothing in his first turn, which was quite a surprise. I was rolling my demon saves like an absolute fiend, and he put a lot of shots into the wound-capped Bloodthirster, the one that can only take 8 wounds per phase. So, like, he put a lot of shots into that, took it down to its 8 wounds, but that meant that he didn't have enough shooting left to kill the other Bloodthirsters. So, that was interesting. And I did the same trick to him where I basically teleported BELAKOR in behind his lines and brought down some Bloodthirsters there. And yeah, basically, I think it was turn 2, maybe turn 3 that he got tabled. So yeah, another really strong result there. And then the 4th and final game, I was actually up against the player who was currently in the first place. So even though I had had a draw, they were randomizing the pairings within brackets. And at that stage, there was only 3 undefeated players, and I was the highest placed person on 2 wins and a draw. So I played up into that winner's bracket, and because they randomized that bracket, I was then playing against the person who was in first place. And he was running a really, really highly tuned Leviathan Tyranids list. He had all of the toys. He had the Reaper of Obliterax guy. He had the Shard Gullet guy. He had, respawning gaunts for days. He had a bunch of warriors, a bunch of Carnifexes. He had a bunch of Zone Thropes and the whatever they're called, Venom Thropes, the one that make you fight last. He had a whole ton of shit. And I was like, okay, this list is terrifying in a standard 40k game, and I'm running this meme list of just Bloodthirsters, which is just silly. And I'm like, the mortal wound damage output from the Zone Thropes, that just cuts straight through my demon saves, so he's going to be killing Bloodthirsters with that. He can do damage across multiple phases, so my phase-capped Bloodthirster is in trouble. And on top of that, he has the Reaper of Obliterax, which cuts through phase-capped anyway. So I'm like, so my defensive abilities mean almost nothing in this game. And yeah, I was quite concerned. In that game, once again, I went first. So I think the only games that I went second, I think I went second against one of the Knight players, and I went second against the Chaos Space Marines. But against this guy, I went first. And basically, I had 7 drops because I was putting a few Bloodthirsters in reserves, and I had a few Bloodletters. I put almost all my Bloodletters in reserves in that game. So I only had a few things that I needed to deploy, and he had like 17. So I basically just deployed my whole army, knowing that he was going to be able to reactively deploy anyway. So I deployed everything along the line, and then he basically deployed everything in one corner, and as far away from like Skarbrand and my Soul Grinders as possible. And his theory was that way they're going to spend the entire game just walking across the table. But what he didn't realize is that by doing that, he had just gifted me the entire table, because his whole army was fighting over one objective in the corner, while my army was just able to stand there on the rest of the objectives, and I got maximum primary, and I was able to push him to 0 primary because we were just constantly fighting over that one objective, and I just never let him have it. So that was a huge part that went into how I won this game. And then also he took Warp Ritual, which was a bold move because I had BELAKOR, who was able to deny, and I also had the Khorne stratagem for a 4-up deny. So I had 2 attempts at denying that psychic power, and he got 0 points for that as well. But basically the way that game worked is I deployed all on the line, and I basically just everything moved and advanced towards him as fast as possible. This time I relied a little bit more on the shooting from the Soul Grinders, because he had deployed his Zone Thropes and his Venom Thropes where I could see them. And I was like, okay, well, I don't want the Venom Thropes making me fight last, and I don't want the Zone Thropes just using their psychic damage to delete Bloodthirsters. So I targeted them first and just killed them, and then moved up and then basically was relying on my demon saves to protect me from all of his direct damage, which worked quite well. It was another one of those games where I was rolling really, really well for my demon saves. But yeah, we played it out, but we more or less called it after turn 3, because basically my first turn I just moved up. He failed to kill anything in his first turn. He put a lot of shots into BELAKOR and basically completely failed to kill him. Thanks to that neg 1 to hit, neg 1 to be wounded, and neg 1 damage. On top of that, with the 4-up demon save, he just couldn't kill BELAKOR. So yeah, as a result, I basically then deep strike down next to BELAKOR while he was still alive, went for some 6-inch charges with Bloodthirsters on one flank, while meanwhile on the other flank, Skarbrand had advanced up twice, so he was relatively close, and I was able to drop more Soul Grinder on that side, right next to BELAKOR for a 6-inch charge as well, and then I just overwhelmed him and killed almost everything. And he took Retrieve Nephilim Data as well, which I think he only got 2 quarters for, because I basically identified early all I need to do is kill all of his infantry, and now he can't score that objective. So I was able to neuter his Warp Ritual, neuter his Retrieve Nephilim Data, and also box him in a corner to neuter his primary. And as a result, he got very, very low score, and I got a massive score. And even though he had the potential to kill a lot of my stuff, because of the way that he had deployed and the missions that he had selected, he wasn't able to generate a very big score. Yeah, and that more or less rounds out the event. So then we did the awards ceremony, which I'll put up at the end of the video for anybody who's interested in watching the awards. Adam Smith, the TO, is absolute fucking legend, really funny guy, so he made the awards presentation quite entertaining. But yeah, so we ended up doing the awards, and I ended up coming first general, so highest place battle score. Got a $150 voucher and a trophy, which is cool. $150, that's going to go towards some more World Eaters. And yeah, overall, great event. Had an absolute fantastic time. So if you are in the Melbourne area, it's definitely worth making the trip down to Geelong for Geelong Heresy. It's a really special event on the calendar because it breaks from the traditional format. So it's really refreshing and a unique experience. So I couldn't recommend the event enough. There are some challenges with the way that they did the scoring and stuff like that, but I'm working with them to make sure that they continue to improve on that going forward. Like, for example, I think they're right that there should be a difference between a big win and a small win, especially in an event with only 4 rounds. They do need to separate those out. However, I still think that if somebody goes undefeated, they should probably win the event, right? You shouldn't be able to overtake someone. So I think they just need to play with those brackets a little bit, play with the scores. So maybe, maybe a draw is worth 10 points, a win is worth 25, and a crushing win is worth like 30 or 40, And that way, if you get a draw, it puts you out of contention for the event. But there's a big difference between a win and a crushing win, And that way you do sort of separate the players, and it'll help you get a clear winner. So there's a few bits of advice like that I'm going to work with them to refine the event going forward so that it's, remains one of the premium events on the Victorian 40k calendar. So yeah, I just wanted to share that with you guys. I hope you enjoyed the slideshow of the beautiful armies that were in attendance. And yeah, I'll leave it there. I'll see you guys in the next one. Cheers. Alrighty guys, thanks for tuning in. I really hope you enjoyed that video. If you did, like, subscribe, comment, all that good shit. And you can also pick up merchandise like this t-shirt, like the dice that we've got coming out, like the objective markers that we have. All really great ways to show your support for the channel. Or if you would like more one-on-one coaching and list advice with myself, you can join our Patreon. You get exclusive access to a Discord server where we work together as a community to make sure that we're all achieving our personal best results at every event. So with that being said, I'll leave it there. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.
Walk for the Blood God.
One of the most coveted awards of the weekend, of course, is the Wooden Spoon. Yeah. Now, we flushed out a bit this year. There's a little store down the road that specialises in products of the adult nature.
Oh god, the spanking battle.
Who am I giving this to?
Isn't it yours?
It's used.
Yeah,
secondhand.
Yeah. I'll share it. I hope you enjoy it, Cappy. That's a true winner right there. Winning our favorites. So one of the joys of running this event is we get a chance to meet new people, and we get to expose them to our way of existence. For better or worse. Now, one particular individual who really kind of captured our hearts and minds over the weekend through putting an exceptional performance in on Friday night, and then following up with an absolute showstopper performance in karaoke last night. We would love to give the Shenanigans Award and his name permanently inscribed on our perpetual trophy to Jackson. Be ever recognised as the diabetic chunder turned one-hit wonder. Fucking love my shenanigans. Yeah,
Jumper Chunder was easy at least.
mate, that was yeah, you did a good one. That was good. That's the greatest problem, not mine. Alright, so we're going to follow up with best sports. And this is been hotly contested this year. We actually had 11 people with equal second best sports. Alright? Now that tells me that you're not assholes, despite my personal opinions. But there was one who stood out above everyone else, and that was Joe Mancola. Yeah. Very much. Well done, mate. Yeah. And again, Heresy Virgin just absolutely kicked ass. Alright, so now we're up to looking at our podium, our placings. We'll start with the presented, and we're going to start with third, work our way up to first. Now, because we've actually had an overlap of awards, as we have, just like the player pack, vouchers go to fourth best. If there's someone within that podium that has a voucher from another category. Okay, so we're spreading the love. Now the fourth best presented armies was Tristan, the Orcs. That's the thing. Lovely Orcs, mate. Alright, so third place, who will not be receiving a voucher, Braden Rice. Second best presented, beautiful, right? Michael Laws. Yeah.
Awesome. Yay!
And best presented, back to back, Gibson. Now, before anyone cries foul, he had anticipation to bring other things this weekend, but I didn't print them in time, so that's on me. Well done, mate. Well done. Okay, so we'll move on to generalship. Yet again, we have a situation where there is one of the people in this podium who is going to be getting a voucher from elsewhere. So we're going to be shifting up a little bit. So the fourth best general was Boyd. No, yeah, no problem. So we push the vouchers down. Why? Everyone only goes with one voucher. Yep. Okay, so the third best general, we'll go on with the second best general voucher, Drew Cole. Well done. Okay. Second best general was Ray Price. And the General, City. Well done, mate. Need a refill.
Remember, it's only a drinking problem if you don't have it open. You told me you drink. That's what he said.
Overall champion. Might be a bit self-explanatory given you've seen so far, but congratulations to Braden Price.
Big tuna. Can you get another one?
I'll get another one.
Another one.
Run the supremacy suit. Alright, okay, so it's all that's wrapped up. Obviously, some thank yous to be done. Huge thank you for the terrain pledges. So we had Target 5 and we had the Risky Rollers. Charlie, you absolute superstar. Brandon, absolute superstar as well. I've got a lot of work to do on my terrain collection. I'm willing to admit that. So you guys have made this event actually possible, so much appreciated. As we did before, Rod and Mark and the venue, fucking legends. I mean, $4, am I fucking kidding me? It's insane. So much love to the venue. We've found our new home. This is now the wargaming mecca for Geelong, and we are happy to be here again. So I look forward to that next year. Also a big thanks to Guff for being our sponsor for the weekend. You know, we've been working together. How many years have we been working together now? Since the fucking beginning. When you were good games, right? Yeah. It's been a long time. So look, Guff always do a great job. We get on real well, and hopefully you guys who've got gift vouchers will get something amazing from there. They've got Black Friday sale at the moment, so that voucher's going to stretch even further. We can find something you're looking for over this weekend.
When is it there?
Black Friday and for Guff. Friday? Jim knows, wherever he knows. And most importantly, Maddie, Nikki, Kingsley, my beautiful, adorable TO team, who do a fucking awesome job and give me the freedom to run around like a drunken idiot for a weekend. They're the ones who make this tournament work, right? Can I get a huge round of applause then, please? And of course, thanks to all of you for being here. I mean, that's fucking awesome.
I just have one last thing. One last thank you and an apology to Adam Flipper.
Alright, so yet again, much appreciated. Appreciate you all being here. I had an awesome weekend, I hope you all did too. Feel free to reach out if you've got any feedback, want, any recommendations for next year. This is an event for you guys, alright? So we want to continue improving, being the best goddamn beer hammer event in the state. And I hope to see you all next year as well. Thank you again.